Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf with Daily Clout, and I'm here with Greg Palast, author of How Trump Stole 2020, The Hunt for America's Vanished Voters, with comics by Ted Rall. Welcome, Greg Palast.
Naomi, it's great to be with you again.
I'm so thrilled because, as I told you when we first connected, you've been one of my last remaining heroes. You're one of the last few investigative reporters we have in the United States, and your work is always prescient, always accurate, and you foresaw that we would be where we are now, going back to the best democracy money can buy, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, Armed Madhouse, which was also a huge bestseller. This one, How Trump Stole 2020, has just come out. We need to get it on the New York Times bestseller list immediately, everybody. So rush out, go to your local independent bookstore's website, go to Amazon if you must, order it right away. Go to the website of Greg Palast and his publisher, Seven Stories Press. Order this book because it tells you everything you need to know about how to avoid getting democracy suspended again. So I'm going to jump right into your bizarrely arresting first page. Donald Trump was reelected president on November 7th, 2018, 2 years before a single ballot was cast. The head explodes. What do you mean by that, Greg?
Yeah, the first chapter is called The End. So now we have to reverse everything. Okay. Yes, Trump stole the election 2 years ago. But we can steal it. I don't want anyone to panic. We can steal it back. That is, we can bust the burglary, okay? What happened was there was a Supreme Court ruling in June of 2018, which opened up a whole new way of stealing votes for the GOP. And basically, it's knocking off voters of color and young people. So they came up with this thing kind of, I would call it purge by postcard. And they took it for a test drive in Georgia. Brian Kemp, who was the Secretary of State. Now, this man's in charge of the voting. He gets to determine who's on the voter rolls, where you vote, whether your vote gets counted, okay? And he's running for governor against Stacey Abrams, the first black woman to ever run for governor in an American state. Supposedly, he won by a few thousand votes. As Stacey Abrams herself says, I won, but I won't be inaugurated. And she particularly cited my findings that, and are you ready for this? It's in the book. And I was knocked out when I got the numbers from my experts. We went through the list of people removed by the GOP, by the Republican Secretary of State, removed, erased, purged from the voter rolls. And we went through name by name using massive databases to determine where these voters were. We found that 340,134 voters exactly were illegally removed, 1/3 of a million voters in a single state. And that is why Stacey Abrams said, I won, I won't be inaugurated. And what happened in that case, by the way, the new rule said, oh, if a state can remove you if they have evidence that you've moved, right? Hey, if you left Atlanta, you shouldn't be voting in Atlanta. If you left Milwaukee, you shouldn't be voting in Milwaukee. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it seems like the criterion they used was, are you black? Are you young? Are you Hispanic? Are you Asian American? That seems to be the people that got the postcards. Now, I was at the Atlanta polling station when a woman was coming out hysterical because her aunt could not vote. Her aunt was dressed to the nines with a walker, 92 years old, Christine Jordan. It was going to be her 50th year of voting at that Atlanta schoolhouse. 50 years since her cousin, Martin Luther King Jr., was assassinated.
Oh,
they threw out Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin. I have that on camera. I have it in the book. I have pictures of her in the book. I went back to her house and saw her with King in photos. He used to have Sunday dinner there. And I said, are you going to do something about it? She says, I will. I said, would you sue? She says, if someone helps me up the courthouse steps with my walker. So some people are ready to fight it. Are you? And that's why, look, I wrote How Trump Stole 2020, not because it's not a prediction. It's what's happened, and we got to steal it back. That is busted. We have to reverse the steal. And so that was in Georgia. They took it for a test drive. Then they go to Milwaukee. I'll just,
Right.
then I know I'm filibustering here, but I'll
No,
back
lay it
in a
all
second.
out.
Okay, so they use the same trick. Now, Milwaukee, remember, Trump won, and I'm putting the air quotes, won Wisconsin by 22,000 votes out of 3 million. There's a reason why Hillary Clinton didn't campaign there. I mean, maybe it wasn't brilliant, but she didn't figure the steal. And so what happened is now they were removing people who they said have moved. And I just went up to Milwaukee. And you'll see in the book, you'll meet Sequana Taylor. They said Sequana Taylor had moved out of Wisconsin or out of Milwaukee. Now, did Sequana Taylor move out of Milwaukee? I asked her, did you move out of Milwaukee? She said, well, I'm Milwaukee County Supervisor. I don't think I'd move out of Milwaukee.
Oh my gosh.
But she was guilty. She was guilty of voting while black, African-American woman. And the hit list in Milwaukee, and it's Milwaukee and Madison. Who's in Madison? Students. Who's in Milwaukee? African-Americans. Yeah. They're removing 150,000 people from Madison and Milwaukee 7 times Trump's margin, because they know there ain't enough white guys to reelect Trump in Milwaukee. Right. These are the games that are being played. Yeah, so they started it in 2018 when they got the Supreme Court's approval. They've been rushing across the states. Georgia, which, by the way, is now a minority white state, it should be a blue state. It is a swing state. They're doing these games, North Carolina, Michigan, Ohio. But we can undo it. We can fix this.
Can I jump in? You wrote an explosive expose in Rolling Stone, as I recall, and I remember exactly where I was. My son was getting a haircut, and the barber finished his hair, and he was just sitting there, and I'm like, I am not moving until I finish reading this Greg Palast expose. I have never forgotten it, but there you explain how they were able to identify African-American voters effectively and students. In what you've just described, you don't really explain how is that possible? How can you tell who someone is by their name, right?
They're so good.
What magic are they using?
Yeah, see, understand. Look, Agent Orange, our president, does not have the brain cells to steal an election. But he does have the guys with the evil genius brains. Like in that case, this was a program put together by a guy named Chris Kobach of Kansas. Can't remember the name. Think KKK. It's called Interstate Crosscheck. And what they were doing is so this guy came up with a trick for Trump. He's Trump's vote thief in chief. By the way, he's a white supremacist who went to Oxford, Yale, and Harvard.
Wow.
And so much for our liberal education. But he came up with a brilliant system. He's removing all the people registered in 2 states or voting twice. If you vote twice, you go to jail for 5 years. It's a federal crime. Right. So he identified, using computers, people registering and voting twice. Now, he got a lot of praise on mainstream media for this program to hunt down these evil double voters. I'm the only reporter, literally, who said, "Can I have the list of these double voters?" He refused.
Yes,
you can see from the hat that I'm an investigative reporter. So with Zach D. Roberts, my undercover helper, we were able to spirit out the lists out of several government offices legally. I never hacked computers legally. Right. And I won't tell you all our tricks. But we got the lists. And what is it? It's a bunch of names. Like in Georgia, they were removing, there's a chapter, by the way, in the book called 358 James Browns. 358 James Browns. They removed 358 James Browns in Georgia because they found a James Brown in Motown. They found a James Brown in Baltimore. They found a James Brown in Phoenix. Now, it's James Edward Brown. It's supposed to be the same voter as James Thomas Brown, James Brown Jr., James Brown Sr., same voter. Now, so they're removing all the James Browns. I talked to the Secretary of State of Michigan. I said, do you know what color a James Brown is? And I said, oh, I've known a white James Brown. I said, oh, then it's okay, right? Now, so here's the deal. 85 of the 100 most common names in America, according to the census, are minority names. John Brown, Jose Rodriguez, David Kim. So you have ethnic names form 85 of the 100 most common names in America. So if you use a common name algorithm, if you're looking for every James Brown and Jose Garcia, you're wiping out voters of color.
You
and
know,
they know it.
this is extraordinary. That is evil. And what also, it raises the question of how does a private citizen get to be purging voter rolls, right? Like how did, or how did he get to insert his algorithm into the deselection process for who gets to vote? Those are public records. How did that happen?
Well, right now, Chris Kobach is running for Senate, but at the time when he created this hit list, he was the Secretary of State of Kansas. These are the little Catherine Harrises that are in charge of the voter rolls, right?
Right,
And
right.
Catherine Harris was the one who wiped out voters, black voters, back in 2000, handed the election to George Bush by removing black people who were felons. I got a hold of that list. None of them were felons. I mean, none, zero,
Jesus.
none. And that's how Bush became president. So it's the variant on how they elected Bush. They're just coming up with new variants.
So
Every
it's a
time the
high
courts,
version.
yes. So I expose it, and then they come up with another one, right?
Yes.
So now, Kobach then gave out these lists to other GOP secretaries of state. So Kobach creates the list for Georgia, for Ohio, for Michigan. I went to Michigan, so I got the inside list. They hate that because they say, oh, we are using this sophisticated program. I say, this sophisticated program with these names? Michael Thomas Brown is the same voter as Michael James Brown. And by the way, look at the racial breakdown.
Right.
You know what? They had one in 7 African Americans in GOP states were on the hit list. 1 in 7.
Oh
This
my God.
is what elected Donald Trump. At least 50,000 voters were removed from the voter rolls of Michigan, where Trump supposedly won by 10,000 votes. So you remove 5 times as many voters from the voter rolls, mainly in Detroit, Flint, etc. That's how Trump became president. And they're just upping the game. They're getting more sophisticated for 2000.
This is terrifying. This is absolutely terrifying. It probably also explains why, or helps to explain why there are always such long lines at predominantly African-American or minority voting districts.
That's right.
And people wait for 4 hours to vote because there's, vote by vote, they're being contested. I just want to chime in with something that I found separately, and I want to validate what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Technology is being used to hide old-fashioned voter theft and voter purging, partisan purging in this regard. But people really need to understand that search algorithms are not neutral. They search for what you tell them to search for. People really don't get that. They think, oh, Google, it's neutral. It's, it's math. It's just like science. It just finds things in a pure way.
Yeah.
That algorithm has been instructed by human beings, by developers, to find those names and purge them. And people really need to start asking the questions you're asking about things like algorithms, and say, well, who programmed it? And just like you're doing, let me see the list. Citizens need to really follow your lead and say, let's not just leave it to the Greg Palasts of the world. There are too few of him. Citizens have to demand those lists and ask to see what was done here.
That's right.
And who did it. I'm sure you agree.
100%. In fact, we have a lot of citizen journalists out there who help, and often in states I have to sue. In the case of Georgia, I went into federal court and beat Brian Kemp in federal court saying, give me your files. The judge virtually hit Kemp on the head with a gavel, and actually said, you win, there will be no trial. Clearly, in effect, the governor's lying, and therefore we don't even need a trial. You've won, Mr. Palast. And he had to give me the list. And by the way, pay my lawyers. But we have citizen journalists all over who help us locally get this material. That's really important. And,
so important.
Yeah. And by the way, you're right. It's because what's happened with these databases and algorithms, as you say, what's going on is Jim Crow has now turned into Dr. James Crow, systems analyst. They've become very sophisticated. These guys, like Chris Kobach of Kansas, like I said, he went to Yale, Harvard, and Oxford. He set up the Homeland Security program, which tracks Muslims. Now, so he already had nice ethnic cleansing technical chops from Homeland Security under John Ashcroft. But by the way, it was such a creepy, racist program that George W. Bush personally ordered Kobach to shut the damn thing down.
Wow.
Kept it in his pocket, and now Trump is using it, but especially using it not just to block Muslims from coming into the country, but stopping Muslims from voting. That's very important. You should see these hit lists.
I wish
Muhammad. That's who they're taking off.
So shocking. So basically technology is ensuring that if you're white and probably a likely Trump voter, you're more likely to be able to cast your ballot. Talk about other dirty tricks that you've uncovered. For instance, provisional ballots.
That's a lovely one. And by the way, I'm responsible in part for that horror show. Back in 2000, when I uncovered that Jeb Bush, Catherine Harris had illegally removed tens of thousands of black men from the voter rolls, I had the list. I got the lists. Now, so then the Congressional Black Caucus demanded a law that would allow people to vote if they were illegally removed from the voter rolls. Now, George Bush was president, so he created something called the Help America Vote Act with Karl Rove. And when Bush tells you he's going to help you vote, look out. So what happened was they said to the Congressional Black Caucus, okay, we'll allow you something called a provisional ballot. If your name is not on the voter rolls, you can fill out a provisional ballot. Here's the problem. They got the provisional ballot, but they didn't get the right to have it counted. Most states throw them away. So you have this weird thing where the federal government requires states to give you this ballot if your name is missing or any reason. They don't like your ID. They don't like your signature. For any reason, you get shunted to a provisional ballot. Now, you have to shunt to that ballot, and you have the right to the ballot, but there's no right to have it counted. And as a result, over 1/3, almost 40%, are never counted, thrown in the garbage. Now, you think it's not a small number. According to the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission, which tracks this stuff, 2.4 million, 2.5 million voters were shoved over to these provisional phony ballots, back of the bus ballots. Over 935,000, just about 1 million of those ballots were never counted. 1 million. Now, Naomi, just think about it. Donald Trump won in 3 states by a total of 70,000 votes. That's it. 1 million provisional ballots not counted. Now, if it were anyone's ballot, who cares? But you're 300% more likely to be given a provisional ballot if you're Hispanic, 250% more likely to be given a provisional ballot if you're black. And if you're young, provisional ballot line, please.
Oh my God.
So what's happening is it's overwhelmingly voters of color and young voters. They don't like your ID or something. And you get the provisional ballot and then it's not counted. I was in Atlanta. Yeah, I mean, so I see this all over. So that's the provisional ballot game. So by the way, probably the most important thing in how Trump stole 2020 is at the very back. There is something I call a Greg and Ted's new improved ballot condom. That's for safe voting. And no, you don't wrap the ballot condom around a ballot. What you do is you take the 7 points about how to protect your vote so that you don't end up with these problems. Like if you go into the voting station, they want to give you a provisional ballot, say, no, 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 I want an election judge to adjudicate right now. There's usually a precinct judge. Give me a regular ballot. Insistence is often what you need to get it. Don't accept their idea that, oh, we'll count this ballot.
Right.
If you have no other way to vote, take it. The second thing is, by the way, please check your registration right now. Every state, you can look up your registration. If you're missing, and by the way, here in California, I looked it up. It said, Greg Palast, no such voter. I checked. Re-register online. This is not like voting online. Re-register online is very important, and then print out your registration. Because, by the way, you fill out those yellow forms at the DMV, there's about a 40% chance on average that it was never entered onto the voter rolls. Don't assume you're registered. Don't assume you're registered.
Wow. So would you recommend re-registering before every important election?
Absolutely.
That is shocking.
Now, are you ready for this? That's in the book, of course. We had the test drive of the big purge in in Georgia. Mm-hmm. Now, altogether, the number just blew me away. According to the federal government, 16.7 million people have been removed from the voter rolls in the past 2 years. 16.7 million voters. Now, that means you, 1 in 12 voters, I told you, Martin Luther King's cousin voting in the same place, 50 years, knocked off the voter rolls. Raheem Shabazz was also right there with me. I went to the polls with him. He's a local radio host. missing from the voter rolls. That's Georgia. Oh, wherever I'm going, I'm seeing this. James Brown's vanished from the voter rolls of Michigan. And you don't know it. You're going to show up. This is what slows up the lines, too. You show up, your name ain't here. You say, well, I asked for a mail-in ballot, and it never got there. That's because you're not registered, ma'am. That's what's happening. So you think everyone's moving, you know, we're talking about mail-in voting. Be careful. You better make sure you're registered. You know what? Here's a basic rule of voting. If you don't get your ballot mailed to you, you can't mail it in. So mail-in voting is very difficult if you don't have a ballot mailed to you, and you ain't getting one if you ain't registered. And if you, by the way, you don't have to re-register if you've moved in your neighborhood, but you're a fool if you don't. They're going to take away your vote. I'm telling you.
My God.
Protect yourself, man.
I'm so horrified. So what are some of the main things, apart from the condom toward the end, the metaphorical condom, that, again, this is the cover. Everyone rush out and get this. Do not go more than 24 to 48 hours without ordering this. You've got to read it cover to cover. It's life-changing information. It's shocking information. You can't do without it as we come up to this election or any election. What kind of policy changes do we need to make to clean this up? I mean, it sounds like kind of death by a thousand cuts. They're so clever. It's like,
right. See, they're doing this, and we're fighting. Like, we took years to fight voter ID and failed to win, by the way.
Right.
Just one thing, one little trick. You need an ID. And are you ready for this? Wisconsin, 182,000 students in the University of Wisconsin system, they put in at the last minute in 2016, and it applies now. They still haven't reversed it. You need a photo state ID to vote. 182 University of Wisconsin students do have a photo state ID, but they said the student ID doesn't count. You like that? You have to switch it to a special new student ID from the Dean of Students office, which is closed because of the virus. So 182,000 University of Wisconsin students have been disenfranchised. And by the way, that's 6 times Trump's margin of victory in Wisconsin. So you remove over 100,000 students with that ID. Now, how does this affect mail-in voting? 1, you got to have the right ID. 2, if you have the ID, are you ready for this one? You have to include a photocopy of the ID in your mail-in ballot, and this is where they're going to throw out thousands of student votes. You have to also include a letter proving you are currently enrolled. And in good standing. You have to have a letter from the school saying you are currently enrolled and in good standing. Now, if you flunked math, what does that have to do with voting? You know, if you didn't pay your tuition last month because you don't have a job anymore because of the virus, why does that mean you lose your vote? But that's what they're doing to the students. And then black folk, remember, you have to have a photo state ID. They say, well, use your driver's license. Naomi, who doesn't have a driver's license? People without cars, people who live in urban areas, apartment buildings use buses, low income. In other words, voters of color, and the color is blue, Democratic. That's what they're doing. So that's a couple things. And again, so by the way, check if you're going to do mail-in voting. 1, check your registration. You ain't getting a ballot if you're not registered. 2, if you didn't vote in the last election, you better re-register. And I say, now you don't lose your registration for not voting, but they won't send you in certain states like Ohio, swing state Ohio, will not send you a absentee ballot unless if you've missed the prior election. It's a nice trick.
They're punished.
Now, here's the trick. Why bother? You ask, how do they pick out Democrats? The answer is they know that the so-called inactive list, people who skipped the midterm election, for example, are 2-to-1 Democrats, because you often have, because of gerrymandering in places like Detroit, you literally you don't have any contested elections. So a lot of people don't vote in the midterms because there's literally no contested election in a lot of areas, and usually in urban areas. So they're so smart at how they work the demographics and the statistics. And by the way, one of the reasons I bust this stuff, in another life, I actually taught statistics, and so I'm not afraid of the math and the details, which a lot of journalists are. When you talk about being an investigative reporter, one of the last, I'm also one of the few. One of the reasons I can do this work is that as we've moved to computers and the thievery gets sophisticated, involves statistics, probability, mathematics, I can handle that. And it scares a lot of American reporters if they have to deal with numbers. But I'm not going to scare you with numbers. The book has more jokes than numbers and has a 48-page comic book by Ted Rall in the middle.
Incredibly entertaining for such a heavy subject. It's such a page turner. I know we only have a few minutes left. Do we have a few minutes left? Yes.
Yes.
So I guess what I want to ask you finally is, I remember when people first started raising these issues in addition to you, and they were really hammered as conspiracy theorists, you're crazy, this is not an issue. How did this, and now people are taking you very, very seriously, of course. I mean, I think, the concern that in this great country, our elections are being poisoned. And, the Carter Center says American elections need international observers now at this point. That's moved now to a very mainstream position. You're a big reason, but other people who have worked hard. Why was it marginalized and is now so central?
Now, I want to correct one thing. It's marginalized in the United States. Remember, I was the investigative reporter for the BBC nightly news program Newsnight. So I was like, when I had these reports on the theft of the American election, we're talking about the top of the BBC nightly news. This is the biggest world mainstream outlet. So I was the mainstream. New York Times, NBC, these are not mainstream. These are side pools as far as the world is concerned, the world of journalism. They're just, repeaters, not reporters. They're not taken seriously. The problem is, how do we get serious reporting taken seriously? So I was at the top of the BBC nightly news, the front page of The Guardian, all over the world on Canadian broadcasting. They're very interested in what happens in American elections. Because remember, when we elect Agent Orange as our president, supposedly, he's their president too. The president of the United States is president of the planet. So people are scared. Like, well, how come America doesn't have any concept of democracy while it's dropping bombs on us, telling us to turn democratic? Why don't they try it? Well, maybe we need to bomb Michigan, except, well, I should be careful because they did, as Michael Moore pointed out, they did actually literally bomb Flint. Now, so the mainstream is finally getting the picture, beginning to say, aha, and you're right. They used to say, Greg Palast is a conspiracy nut, which always got a big laugh from the conspirators. Right. Now I'm working with some of the big outlets, and some of the major outlets are beginning to pick up our stories. In part, for example, when I did the film, before I wrote How Trump Won 2020, I wrote How Trump Stole 2020. Before the 2016 election, I did a film showing how Trump was going to steal 2016. No one believed me. The best democracy money can buy. And, everyone bought their party dress for Hillary's inaugural because they weren't figuring on the steal. And the steal is not small. Look in the book. 5.8 million ballots were disqualified. 3 million of those, by the way, mail-in ballots, the most dangerous way to vote. The most dangerous way to vote. People are worried about computers. Forget it. Mail-in balloting, 22%. 22%, 1 in 5 mail-in ballots are never counted. Don't let it be your ballot.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't mail in your vote, because if you don't mail in your vote, my friend, you could die waiting in those lines. Right. But don't die. Get your mail-in ballot, but know how to do it. You have to be registered. You can't be inactive. Contact if you're not getting a postcard, you don't see it for a mail-in vote, you contact your local board of elections. When you fill it out, oh my God, make sure that you fill it out correctly. And if you are in Wisconsin, you're a student, put in that photocopy of the student ID, a proof that you are currently registered. And then, my friend, add a stamp to the envelope, 2 stamps, not one. Wow. 100,000 votes were disqualified for postage due.
Oh, God, what a 19th century concept. Honestly, my head has exploded so many times in this interview. You've been so generous. If we all do what you tell us to do in this, one of the most important books you'll ever read between now and November, do you think there's a chance that we can have truly objective outcomes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, here's word number 1. My friends, they can't steal all the votes all the time. This is why Obama was elected twice. By the way, just, my my writing partner, Bobby Kennedy, called up Obama and said, do you know about this stuff while he was running?
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the most knowledgeable politicians I've ever encountered on the issue of vote suppression, racist vote suppression. So you say, wait, but he didn't do anything as president about it, or very little.
Right.
And he didn't raise the issue running. He said, you know why? He says, just overwhelm them. If they steal 5 million votes, we just have to have 7 million more people vote. So they can't steal all the votes all the time.
Right.
They're going to wipe out millions of voters off the voter rolls. Put your vote back. Don't let your vote be disqualified, thrown out. Make sure you fill out that the outside of the envelope correctly. Don't use your own envelope. Use only the envelope they've given you. Make sure that you got the right postage. And if you're in Alabama or in Missouri, you better get your ballot notarized. You like that? It's got to be notarized. I mean, they're making it's so insane. It's like, I'm investigating, but some of the stuff is in your face. And so you can protect your own vote. We can overwhelm them. Don't steal your own vote by not voting.
Right.
Don't start saying, oh, it doesn't matter, or one vote doesn't count. The state legislature of Virginia went Republican by a single voter's vote. A single voter's vote.
Oh,
one.
Gosh.
So now your vote, my friend, does count. And no, it's not as easy as pick and lick. That is, you don't just pick a president, lick the stamp, and send it off.
Right.
You better be very careful that you get the ballot in time. Ask for your ballot 2 months in advance minimum. I'm telling you this because in Georgia, when you saw those long lines, I spoke to the head of the ACLU. The reason people were in line, including her husband, the head of the ACLU in Georgia, was that they asked for the ballots and never got them. And she asked 45 days in advance. It wasn't enough.
Oh, my gosh.
Her husband got his ballot the day after the election.
Oh,
this is
my
the head
gosh.
of the ACLU. She's
Oh,
not
my gosh.
protected. You aren't. So you better protect your vote.
Well,
we can bust the burglary. Now, I want to give you one little other thing, please, if I can.
Yes.
Because you've been so cool. I want to do something. I'm sure my foundation will out. The book, by the way, is put out by my foundation. I don't make money off it. So when I'm hawking it, don't think I'm putting money in my pocket. But I will give you, the foundation will do something else. We have an audio book version coming out. It's not, it won't be out for a month officially, but you can get it right away if you pick up How Trump Stole 2020 this week. Anyone who does that and goes to gregpalast.com, just send me a screenshot of your receipt or a photo or something, whatever, and I will send you, go to gregpalast.com, send it to me, or send it to audiobook@gregpalast.com, audiobook@gregpalast.com, and we'll send you the free audiobook.
Wow.
Because it's important that we get, and then you play it in your carpool. You got to make me do me, you have to agree to one thing though. You must play it in your carpool, including for that pinhead who thinks Trump actually won in 2016. So we can, that's the deal. You gotta proselytize, because we have to tell people how to save their votes, and we have to wake people up who think that the system is just hunky-dory, and it ain't if you ain't orangey white.
Well, I would go further, and what a generous offer that is to everyone. You all better go to gregpalast.com. And really, if you care about investigative reporting, it's embarrassing for people to say this themselves, so I'll say it on behalf of his organization. You need to support Greg Palast's investigative organization, not just by buying this book, not just by giving to all your friends and family, not just by sharing the audio, but you need to actually send money if you want anyone left to be able to bring you these important stories, because there are very, very few outlets that are still able to do that. Even mainstream news media do not have the resources to investigate like the incomparable Greg Palast. I hate to tear myself away, but I know you've got another interview. So I'm just going to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for the work that you're doing. Thank you on behalf of our 240,000 Daily Clout followers on various platforms. And everyone, honestly, this is a live or die kind of book. It's a live or die kind of moment. I mean that metaphorically, but I also mean that literally. And I would say, because, does democracy live or die? If democracy lives or dies, a lot of other things live or die. And lastly, I don't think it's just about the orange guy, as you put it. I think this is really a transpartisan message. Whoever.
Exactly. Thank you.
Our survival, our freedom, our future depends on elections being clean. Thank you so much, Greg Palast. The book is How Trump Stole 2020. Rush out, get it now, support this great man, an icon, a hero, and thank you so very much.
You're very welcome, and what a wonderful service you provide by, I mean, you're taking on subjects that people just won't touch and need the information. You go in depth, and by the way, that's why I really appreciate it. That's why I gave the extra time too, because you really give people an opportunity to put out the substance, and I really appreciate the work you've been doing. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you. Well, the feeling's mutual. Thank you so much. Be safe. Bye-bye.